So we're in chapter 2, starting at 238. So this is a great verse because it's about the Asr prayer, middle prayer. All right. So do we have a volunteer? Taiba, did you want to read?
Yeah, I'll go if no one else wants to go, inshallah.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Subtitle: You shall observe the contact prayers. You shall consistently observe the contact prayers, especially the middle prayer, and devote yourselves totally to God. Under unusual circumstances, you may pray while walking or riding. Once you are safe, you shall commemorate God as He taught you what you never knew. Subtitle: Alimony for widows and divorcees. Those who die and leave wives, a will shall provide their wives with support for a year, provided they stay within the same household. If they leave, you commit no sin by letting them do whatever they wish, so long as righteousness is maintained. God is Almighty, most wise. The divorcees also shall be provided for, equitably. This is the duty upon the righteous. God thus explains His revelations for you, that you may understand. Subtitle: Striving in the cause of God. Have you noted those who fled their homes, though they were in the thousands, fearing death? God said to them, Die, then revived them. God showers His grace upon the people, but most people are unappreciative. You shall fight in the cause of God, and know that God is hearer, knower. Who would lend God a loan of righteousness to have it repaid to them multiplied manifold? God is the one who provides and withholds, and to Him you will be returned. Footnote for 238. All 5 prayers are found in 238, 11, 114, 1778, and 2458. When the Quran was revealed, the contact prayers, salat, had already been in existence. Appendix 9. The details of all 5 prayers, what to recite, and the number of units, rakahs per prayer, etc., are mathematically confirmed. For example, writing down the number of units for each of the 5 prayers next to each other, we get 24434, which is 19 times 1286. Also, if we do I have to read all this? I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, go for it. Read it. Or do you want me to read it?
I can. Also, if we use like brackets, yeah. Also, if we use that symbol to represent Surah 1, Al-Fatiha, where the symbol equals the surah number, followed by the number of verses, followed by the number of each verse, the number of letters in each verse, and the geometrical value of each letter, writing down to, symbol, for symbol, brackets, whatever, I don't even know what to, like, a symbol.
But you gotta say left bracket, right bracket, left bracket.
Like a force, bracket, 3, bracket.
Okay, yeah, we get it.
Yeah, you get it.
Anyway, it's 24434. That's the rakas or the day. It produces a multiple of 19, C11. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments about the verses we read? We just read from 238 to 245. This is pasted in VC1 chat. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the verses that were read? And you can put your question or comment. Either you can come up and speak, or you can type it in the VC1 chat. So I just wanted to address. Go ahead. Okay, your sound is bad.
239. Under all circumstances, you working or riding once.
Okay, your sound is really bad. Your sound is really bad. Disconnect and come back.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So quickly on 238, I just wanted to say, here we see that we have the middle prayer. So a lot of times we get asked, okay, what are the 5 prayers? So we know that place in the Quran it says we do the contact prayer at both ends of the day and during the night. So that's Fajr, Maghrib, and Isha. That's 3. And then there's another verse that says we do it when the sun declines from the highest point at noon. So that's 4. Therefore, the middle prayer would be between these 4, which would be the Asr prayer. That was what I wanted to comment on that. Regarding 239, I wanted to say that this proves that there is ritual prayer because in 239 it says you may pray under unusual circumstances, you may pray while walking or riding. That means under ordinary circumstance, you're doing it in a different way. So therefore, this means that because if we're saying that you can just do salat always at all times under all methods or a not undefined method, then why would it matter if when you're in an unusual circumstance or a normal circumstance? What it's saying was unusual circumstance, you may pray while walking or riding. That means under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be doing that. That implies and shows us that there is rituals involved, specifically because you cannot prostrate when you're, for example, riding a horse, right? Or you can't, and or you can't prostrate and walk at the same time.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can hear me now. And the second thing we learned about this, everybody claiming that yeah, it was known, it was known. God said, as He taught you what you know not. So Muhammad didn't know how to pray; he was taught how to pray. If I say no, he was known, everybody was praying the same. No, God is telling you no, and God did tell us in different verses that I have given you different rites for each of your communities. I have given you, of course, Salah. Abraham was doing Salah, but God is not saying that we're doing the Salah the same way Abraham was doing it. For each community, I have taught you to do your own Salah. That's what it means. I give you different rites.
I think the misunderstanding here is that they were doing it wrong. So God purifies it by sending the revelations. We see this at the time, when Rashad came, he is doing the slot. Before the revelations, he was doing it wrong. God corrected him. It's the same thing for the prophet. Is that the idol worshippers at Mecca were doing their salat, but it was a means of mockery and repulsion. God corrected it. To
So
say that from this it means that they didn't know that what salat was or anything of that foundation, that's a jump in understanding that isn't supported.
Yeah, as far as Hajj, we don't know if they actually came. But as far as Salat, we know that everybody did Salat. Jesus did Salat, Moses did Salat. And 2267, and it also says like Surah 9, I think verse 59, says that generations after them lost the Salat, right? So Salat is something that has been lost by the children of Israel and the Christians. But in general, every community has their own way of commemorating God, and God does not hold them account, like punish them or something if they don't do the salat exactly how it is decreed in the Quran. So I think that's the only significance of 2267, that God says don't argue with others if they want to do it differently, those who don't follow the Quran. But as far as the followers of the Quran, what is prescribed is the salat. And the question of whether it pre-existed or not, I think in Surah Baqarah, verses 125 onwards, if you read the whole passage, after the Hijrah, there was a lot of conflict between Prophet Muhammad and the Jews and the Christians. They kept challenging him because their rituals that they practiced at the time were different. They didn't want to do salat. They didn't want to face the Qibla and all that, right? They didn't want to do salat exactly as was already being done. And that's the reason why do you want to argue about Abraham when he was neither Jewish or Christian? All these arguments that are happening between Prophet Muhammad and the Jewish and the Christian people, they were objecting to do the salat the way that they considered the pagan Quraysh were doing. They were objecting to turn towards the Masjid al-Haram because that was not the Qibla that they were used to. And this is the conflict that's going on. I think from that, what we can infer is that the Salah was transmitted. And first of all, and beyond that, they were custodians, right? The Quraysh were the custodians of Masjid al-Haram, just like the Saudi family, House of Saud are the custodians of Masjid al-Haram today. Just like that, they were the custodian. They called it Masjid for a reason. They were already doing sujood. And it's something that pre-existed, predated the Quran, Masjid al-Haram. It's not something that Prophet Muhammad said, okay, this was where Abraham built it, let's build a mosque here. No, it was a pre-existing mosque. So mosque existed, salat existed, sujood existed, ruku existed, everything existed, everything was there. The passage is only clarifying that these actually come down from Abraham in Surah Baqarah, I think 124 all the way down. It's answering the challenges of the Jews and the Christians who didn't want to do this practice. And I believe it's also in that context that God says that for every congregation, they have their own rituals. Don't argue. But as far as the Quran is concerned, we do it the way it was transmitted down from Abraham.
So I put a historical reference in the Khan Academy. It says, even before Islam, Mecca was an important site of pilgrimage for the Arab tribes of North and Central Arabia. Although they believed in many deities, they came once a year to worship Allah in Mecca. Interesting. That's very consistent with what we believe in the Quran. Additionally, that's a really good point that Peter raised. It says, we taught them what we never knew. It's true. Rashad didn't know that he's supposed to worship God alone and his prayers are supposed to be devoted to God alone. That doesn't mean he's never heard of prayer and didn't know anything about how to do the prayer. Similarly, God clarified many issues for the Prophet and the Arabs when it came to the religious practices. So it can very safely be argued that in regard to this, it's in 239. It says, what's the exact words used? 239 says it says, once you are safe, you shall commemorate God as he taught you what you never knew. So for everyone that just joined, we read from 238 to chapter 2, 238 to 245. If you have any questions or comments, you can share them. The topic was, yeah, go ahead, please.
Comment. So I pasted a couple verses. The first one is 283. It says, we made a covenant with the children of Israel. So God is talking about this. You shall not worship except God. You shall honor your parents and regard the relatives, the orphans, the poor. You shall treat the people amicably. You shall observe the contact purse salat and give the obligatory charity zakat. This is part of God's covenant with the children of Israel. We see it again in 5:12. God had taken a covenant with the children of Israel and raised among them 12 patriarchs. And God said, I'm with you so long as you observe the contact prayer salat, give the obligatory charity zakat. We see that there's a precedent that they're responsible for. And in addition, we read about Moses in 28:27. He said, so this is Moses' father-in-law, I wish to offer one of my two daughters for you to marry in return for working for me for 8 pilgrimages. And this is Hajjin, right? So in essence, it's saying that even at that time, they were doing pilgrimage. When Moses left Egypt, he was in Midian, and from Midian to Mecca, they were performing a pilgrimage. If you look, like I put an image of a Jewish prayer. One thing that they do is they put this thing, it's called a phalanx tree, where you put this black cube on your head. I mean, think of it, like, where did this come from? You wrap this leather strap 7 times around your arm. These are very analogous to kind of the commemorations that we do in when we do the pilgrimage to the Kaaba. These practices intentionally, and you see it rampantly throughout the Bible, anything that pointed towards the Ishmael lineage, they basically either corrupt or they remove because they don't want any association with the Arabs. They want to basically keep everything under Isaac, and it's to the point of just like really, gross distortions in that regards. Um, just had one other comment was just regarding 2238, where Rashad translates, "You shall consistently observe the contact pairs." What's interesting is there's other verses where it's agam, which means like in essence to stand guard, to be consistent in something. The word that's used here is hafizu, which has a meaning of guarding. I just think of that aspect, that guarding over our salat, that you could think of this also in the sense of not allowing any distortions, any alterations, any other names entering the salat. One thing
Yeah.
that it just makes me conscientious of, and I have to do it, more than I think most people, is recalibrating how I'm doing my pronunciations. Because I notice, over time, if Arabic isn't your native tongue, it's going to drift. Where all of a sudden you start the speech starts drifting, and that's something that I don't know how other people feel about that, but I think it's warranted to every so often kind of try to recalibrate the way we do our pronunciations.
Yeah. And dude, I think you made a really good point about the word hafidh, because it is actually the very same word that's, used like to talk about the preservation of the Quran. Like when God says He'll preserve the Quran, and we clearly see that happening. So we're taught to do the same, preserve our salah, right?
But I don't think that you are addressing the problem if you just avoiding some verses. You got to justify every single verse that is being quoted. Nobody
Hmm.
denied that Salah been all the practices. It was Salat, as the brother said, Zakat, and everything given to Abraham. God is
Hmm.
saying it's different according to the communities. Are we denying that?
No.
So then let's move on. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, but wait. But the argument was made that I made was that we don't observe Sabbath, and we don't have any association of any practices to Abraham that we don't have. So he is our congregation, right? He says we give a specific rights to each congregation. Abraham is our congregation. So we have to have the same rights as Abraham. We cannot have different
God,
rights than Abraham.
God is describing Sabbath.
Okay, your voice is getting bad. Your voice is getting bad.
You're cutting out. Just
Yeah.
give it a second.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions about comments about the verses read? Otherwise, we can move on to the next set.
So 2245, it says, "Who would lend God a loan of righteousness to have it repaid to them, multiplied manifold? God is the one who provides with and withholds, and to him you will be returned." You think of this concept, and it's hard to wrap our heads around. Anything we spend in the cause of God, it's not gone. It's actually going to be paid back to us in with manifold. You think about people who get into like these investments and say, "Oh, this Dogecoin, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever. This is the new big thing. This is the thing that everyone has to kind of jump on board, and everyone piles their money into it." Funny thing is, there's no guarantees there. This is a guarantee that God gives without any reservations. You pay one dime in the cause of God, that it will be repaid to you manifold. God says in the other verse, it's 700 times manifold. That's insane. Like, there's no other investment in the world that pays this kind of dividend. And you think there's another verse we were talking about the other. I think it was earlier this week or last week, where God says He'll pay people back with the best of what they've done. You take the consideration of Abraham. He sees these two individuals who are traveling, right? Doesn't know them, they're strangers. And he goes and he gets the best food. And you think about what he got. He got a roasted calf. Think about the potential a calf has. That as it grows, it can produce other things, until it's full grown and produce the meat. That no, he took it at that time because the meat's the most delicious, the most tender, and he roasted it for these strangers. Imagine what Abraham is going to have on his, list of courses for meals in the hereafter for doing such an act. This is something that God willing just motivates us to want to do more in the cause of God.
Any other questions or comments on this? Otherwise, inshallah, we'll start from 246.
Got another comment for 2243. So it's interesting. It says, "Have you noted those who fled their homes, though they were in the thousands, fearing death? God said to them, 'Die, then revive them.' God showers His grace upon the people. Most people are unappreciative." The reason they were fleeing was because they were fleeing from the thing that they feared, which was death. God created a situation for them not to fear this thing, that God controls life and death. A lot of times we have these phobias, these fears, these reservations regarding things that God is commanding us to do. God tells us, look, this thing that you fear, in essence, I'm going to put you face to face with it, and you're going to realize it's nothing to fear about. And from that, you grow stronger. Like, there's a quote, when you reach hardship, don't wish that the problem is easy. That the problem is easier. Wish that you're stronger. And that's the what God does is He uses these situations not to just destroy our opposition, but to strengthen us. The opposition seems trivial. And, a lot of times when we get into these uncomfortable situations, rather than saying, God strengthen us, allow us to persevere, allow me to, be able to do what I need to in order to maintain righteousness, we wish for the problem just to go away, to disappear.
All right, if there's no further questions, I have the next batch of verses. If I have a volunteer to read, please come up. Otherwise, I'll read, inshallah. 2246. Saul, have you noted the leaders of Israel after Moses? They said to their prophet, if you appoint a king to us, a king to lead us, we will fight in the cause of God. He said, is it your intention that if fighting is decreed for you, you will not fight? They said, why should we not fight in the cause of God when we have been deprived of our homes and our children? Yet when fighting was decreed for them, they turned away, except a few. God is aware of the transgressors, questioning God's wisdom. Their prophet said to them, God has appointed Talut, Saul, to be your king. They said, how can he have kingship over us when we are more worthy of kingship than he? He is not even rich. He said, God has chosen him over you and has blessed him with an abundance in knowledge and in body. God grants his kingship to whomever he wills. God is bounteous, omniscient. Okay, let me just read this one too, and then we could talk about it. Ark of the Covenant. Their prophet said to them, the sign of his kingship is that the Ark of the Covenant will be restored to you, bringing assurances from your Lord and relics left by the people of Moses and the people of Aaron. It will be carried by the angels. This should be a convincing sign for you if you are really believers. And the footnote of 2:246 says that this same history is narrated in the Bible's book of 1 Samuel, or is it 1 Samuel or 1 Samuel? Chapter 9 and 10. Is there any questions or comments about the three verses that I read thus far?
Can we actually read to 252 so we get the whole narrative of Saul?
Yeah, I can do that.
Maybe
Inshallah.
someone else. Yeah, if someone else wants to read
Is there a volunteer for reading?
You guys want me to read?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. David and Goliath 2:49. When Saul took command of the troops, he said, God is putting you to the test by means of a stream. Anyone who drinks from it does not belong with me. Only those who do not taste it belong with me, unless it is just a single sip. They drank from it except for a few of them. When he crossed it with those who believed, they said, now we lack the strength to face Goliath and his troops. Those who were conscious of meeting God said, many a small army defeated a large army by God's leave. God is with those who steadfastly persevere. When they faced Goliath and his troops, they prayed, our Lord grant us steadfastness, strengthen our foothold, and support us against the disbelieving people. They defeated them by God's leave, and David killed Goliath. God gave him kingship and wisdom, and taught him as he willed. If it were not for God's support of some people against others, there would be chaos on earth. But God showers his grace upon the people. These are God's revelations. We recite them through you truthfully, for you are one of the messengers. Shall I read the footnotes?
Sure.
Just the 252, because I already read the other one.
Oh, because you already did the other one, yeah. In keeping with the mathematical composition of the Quran, God has willed that the name of the messenger mentioned here shall be spelled out mathematically. The discovery of the Quran's miraculous 19-base code has been divinely reserved for God's messenger, the covenant. By adding this verse 252 plus the geometrical value of Rashad 505 plus the geometrical value of Khalifa 725, we get 252 plus 505 plus 725, which equals 1482, or 19 times 78. Please see appendices 2 and 26 for the complete details related to the proven identity of God's messenger of the covenant, to whom this verse clearly refers. There we go.
Any comments or questions?
I had a few. Regarding
Go ahead, boss.
the 246, the first verse, going in order, inshallah. It says at the end of it, yet when fighting was decreed for them, they turned away except a few. So when fighting is decreed for us, we have to step up, right? Like basically we gotta fight when it's put on us, right? We put in these situations. Kind of Peter was talking about this in regard to the earlier verses. We put in a circumstance. God is strengthening us. There is another verse that talks about toughening up the believers, but obviously we don't necessarily um, we don't necessarily want to be in that circumstance. But this is it. And let's look at the other verse. This is actually really interesting. Um, let me put the verses here. The other set that I was talking about. It's in chapter 3, okay, 3:139. It says, "You shall not waver, nor shall you grieve, for you are the ultimate victors. If you are believers, if you suffer hardship, the enemy also suffers the same hardship. We alternate the days of victory and defeat among the people. God thus distinguishes the true believers and blesses some of you with martyrdom. God dislikes injustice." Then 3:141 says, "God thus toughens those who believe and humiliates the disbelievers." So we get strong from these interactions, from these fights, from these battles. We become battle hardened. So I think that is important to embrace the circumstances that we get put into.
Mm.
I would like to make a comment because I think that kind of an understanding of what's going on in these debates is problematic. I think it's kind of at the core of what's caused so much division, and I feel that there's been a conflating of the idea of fighting. Fighting is conflated with just debate and dispute. It's just that because fighting is in this country, it's freedom of religion. I mean, there is no fighting. You can believe whatever you want. Nobody is getting kicked out of their home, and nobody is dying because of their views. So to me, this is a problem of an understanding of freedom of expression. It's a misunderstanding of how to debate and how to treat people. And I think I've been in a community where basically I was kicked out because of my understanding of this, because in a debate, I wasn't fighting it hard enough, like basically calling them idiots and stupid and all this kind of stuff, going down in the gutter. Fighting. Debate is not fighting. And I think that a case could be made that this has been conflated. We are not in fights. We are simply supposed to be debating in the best possible manner.
I have a comment. I find these verses fascinating in the sense that it really depicts God's system. That God's system is a process of refinement. During this refinement, people are going to perpetually drop out. What you're left with, sadly, is only a few individuals, but it shows God's mercy. You think of the billions of people on this planet, if it was up to the angels even, they would have said we would all been in hell. There's a subset of human beings and jinns that deserve redemption. You see this process where the first group of people, they said, look, they said, will you mobilize? They said, yeah, of course we will. Okay, mobilize. No, we don't want to. Okay, we want a king. Okay, Saul's going to be your king. Ah, we don't like this guy. Okay, there's a stream. Don't drink from it. But I'm thirsty. Okay, hey, we have to go fight this army. But now we're too deprived of our nutrients and we can't fight. It's like you just see perpetually they're just being weeded out to only a small subset, and that's all that took to slay the other side. What's interesting is this verse that Navid put, 3:141, where Rashad he translates, and God toughens those who believe. The word that's used for toughen there is comes from the root suspect. Maybe you can help me. Mahisa,
واللي
which
يمحص سؤال محص yeah.
which means a refinement. And this is what the believers go through is we're perpetually being refined to reach a level of purity. When we give zakat, it's refinement. When we do our salat, it's refinement. When we're put to these tests, we're being refined. If we can persevere and not get distracted, not get swayed away by other shiny objects, God guarantees, look, you're going to be successful. It's part of this overall process.
It's like you have this. It's like the bulk of the believers are this one big sword, and there's this like the sharpening of the sword and basically brittling out and weeding out like the people who are truly, stick to the bulk of the believers to the end of it, right? And will like and try to weed out all the hypocrisy,
It's like look at the
I
just yeah the example of the children of Israel, right? It's like no group is mentioned more in the Quran than this group. And at the beginning they're doubtful about Moses. They blame him, and then finally, they're free. And what do? They say, "Oh, we won't believe until we see God physically. Oh, we won't enter this gate. Oh, we want this other food." And each time they're just getting weeded and weeded out to the point where it's like at the end there's only a few people left. Not to mention the calf and all the other ways that they defied, following these commands. But I just see it. It's very simple, and it always has to do with God sending His revelations through His messengers. Messengers come, they give very straightforward commands, and it's up to us to say, okay, we hear and we obey. They're not asking us to go and do something sinful or hurtful. It's literally things that are scary, don't make sense, and if we do it, we'll be successful.
Mm, yeah, that's awesome. It kind of reminds me of like there's like because when it comes to people who are Quran alone, right? There's different regards they hold to the Prophet too, and some say like he just came and gave the Quran and he left. Some say he was like a political leader as well. Some say he has different roles and such. And this verse really, to me, calls out the people that say like, "Oh, he just came and gave the book and that's all he did," right? Like, but then, thing is, he had roles in the community as well. Like, he had to lead the believers in these battles and all that. And it reminds me of the people that like say, "Oh, well, we don't have to help and fight him. We're just like it's more righteous to do so, but we don't have to help him." Like this verse is kind of calling them out as well, like weeding them out and telling them, yeah, that when it comes to it, they'll never actually fight and help when it really comes down to it.
I just I just wanted to address this, that I feel like there are circumstances where we can fight physically currently. Like I can go fight Russia, I guess. But what I'm saying right now is that it's not, mostly in our current day and era. Fighting is done with our tongue, right? I mean, my words can inflict more damage to an enemy, way more than if I took a gun and went on the battlefield and fought them, because we fight with ideas, we fight with our speech. So, and I believe actually Rashad even talks about this. Jeff, maybe you're aware. I can look it up for you, but I think I could be mistaken. I think he talks about in this era, and we fight with our tongues now. I could be wrong. I have to confirm that. But basically, I do believe this, irrespective of it, whether or not he said it, that right now it is a form of fighting. When I'm fighting for the truth against a Christian who's telling me Jesus is God, I'm fighting in that. And these interactions make me stronger, and they increase my conviction, and they make me a stronger believer. And so I don't see this the same as bickering or this kind of thing. There's one truth, inshallah, we fight for the truth.
I think one thing that Jeff said that's totally spot on is calling people names and being childish is not fighting, and it's not even helping in the cause of God. So in that regard, I think that's one of the aspects. 'Cause I've seen the same thing. They're like, no, you have to be harsh and stern with these people. Why are you having civil conversation with them? It's like, no, this is like the best form of yeah, putting up an offense.
Well,
I
it
I
think
agree with
depends.
that.
There should be an element of harshness when it comes down to the right circumstance, though. What does the Quran say? Like
Harsh and stern.
ashidda al kuffar, right? So the harsh upon the disbelievers, right? There
uh,
is an element of
wait
harshness in the right circumstance that you have to take.
wait a second. All of this is, it's just conflating everything in my view. It's literally that, like for example, if I say do not cross this line, I could even say this is the line, do not cross it. I can even just say it really, just just as a matter of fact. That's a harsh statement. Do not cross this line. That's just, you don't need to be harsh. We're supposed to debate in the best possible manner. This is a big problem, this conflating, doing it in the spirit of fighting. it just it hurts your soul. If you think you're fighting, if you think you're in a battle, you're not. Everyone is a potential believer. Everyone. And to go at it as if it's a fight, it totally it ruins the whole spirit of debate. And we transgress against each other. We do it all the time here. And I believe that it's this is the fundamental. This is why. It's because of this conflating of fighting. We got people thinking they're soldiers here on these servers, and we're not soldiers on here. We're supposed to be God's representatives, debating in the best possible manner. That's how I just think it's a big problem.
So I just have a question. So we learn in the Quran that martyrdom is not limited to those who die in a physical battle. We can become martyrs here. So if we're martyrs because we're fighting in the cause of God, and that proves that fighting is not limited to physical battles, right?
You know what's
No,
actually interesting about that verse
Uh,
is it says they're the martyrs and the saints, and the word for saint is sadaq. This is someone who speaks the truth. It's interesting that those two are paired. I got two verses though, and to Jeff's point, I think we there's validity to what's being stated, and we can't just kind of be dismissive of that. So in 652 it says, "And do not dismiss those who implore their Lord day and night, devoting themselves to Him alone. You are not responsible for their reckoning, nor are they responsible for your reckoning. If you dismiss them, you will be a transgressor." That if we dismiss people willy nilly because we don't like them or we don't like what they said, despite the fact of them being devoted to God alone, God is calling us transgressors. So you have to be conscientious of that. The other one is it doesn't mean that we accept everyone as a believer. 494 is a good example. It says, "Oh, you believe, if you strike in the cause of God, you shall be absolutely sure. Do not say to one who offers you peace, you are not a believer, seeking the spoils of this world, for God possesses infinite spoils. Remember that you used to be like them, and God blessed you. Therefore, you shall be absolutely sure before you strike. God is fully cognizant of everything you do." There are certain people, they come to the server, their intent is to harm, to ridicule, to mock, to dismantle the very foundation of our belief. Those people, if they come in with that demeanor, I'm going to treat them as an enemy. The second that, in essence, they say, look, they're going to offer an olive branch, they're going to have civil discourse, I'll talk to them in the same manner. The way I see it in the Quran is it's tit for tat, with room for forgiveness and misunderstanding. Meaning that if someone comes in again, angry and belligerent, then they're going to see an equivalent response back. If they come in, they say, "Look, I have a difference of understanding. This is how I see it. How do you guys see it?" Then we're going to treat them with respect. We're going to be amicable with them, and I think it's important that we don't err on the side of being too overtly friendly or too overtly aggressive.
I would just say that God tells us to not sit with them. That's what God tells us to do. He doesn't say to fight them. These are people blaspheming against God, and let's see how harsh God tells you to deal with it. He says, "Do not sit with them," and then and don't befriend them. That's the thing. I think that we conflate, we get the wrong spirit if we're going to treat these people in that way. I think it's completely antithesis to freedom of expression and having a society by which we can tolerate each other's even blasphemous concepts that they say. I mean, if they're not hurting you physically, that's the question comes down to, where is the line? Where does harm begin? When and this goes to the core of understanding freedom of speech. I think it's worth looking at deeply.
I think if we used physical force against, speech, then we would be in the wrong. But again, if someone is coming and they're arguing and being very, crude in their argumentation, being disingenuous, in kind of the arguments they put forward, don't expect to have sympathy from me. Don't expect for me to, put on my kitty gloves to deal with them. I think that's
But
something that, in essence,
more times than not, I've listened to these things and I see it as a retribution upon us for not being sensitive enough, or it's usually people are responding to something previous, or there's a reaction. A lot of times they're reacting, they're already in fight mode because they've been dissed or felt dismissed in some kind of a way. And I feel like most of the time these are retributions upon us for our behavior because of our demeanor and how we're doing it. That we bring it upon ourselves. I don't feel like we're victims of this at all. I feel like if we bring it upon ourselves.
I think there's validity to what you're stating, but there's nuance there too. Two things we have to distinguish between those who are in the part of the community and those who are outside. Surah 49 basically distinguishes between those who are within the walls, those who are outside of the walls, right? The way we behave is going to vary in the sense where those who are inside the walls, we have to be more forgiving, not suspicious, give them the benefit of the doubt. Look at this verse 49:9. Right? It says if two groups of believers fought with each other. I don't think this is limited to physical fighting. This could be, bickering, any kind of verbal argumentation. It says you shall reconcile them. The way I understand this is the neutral party in this dispute needs to intervene and say, look, let's reconcile. Let's figure out some system of peace. It continues, says if one group aggresses against the other, it says you shall fight the aggressing group until they submit to God's command. This is something I see more often than not submitters fail on. They say, look, I don't want to get involved. This isn't between me, right? Or in essence, they pick the side that they believe they have the same belief as, even though that might be the aggressing side. The way I see this is like, look, when it comes to these disputes that are amongst, believers, is that we have to first reconcile, maintain the peace, then we can address the topic at hand. But to say that the fighting is only in the sense of physical, I think this verse kind of shows that that's not the case. But then two, that the obligation on the community, especially those who are neutral, is to try to maintain the peace. That if we see people getting out of line, we see one group consistently aggress the others, that it's the responsibility of the group to put a stop to that. And more often than not, I've seen communities where they tolerate belligerence and just like aggressive behavior because they don't want to stir the pot, or b they agree with what the person is saying, even though that their manner, their behavior is against what God is advocating.
That's a really
I don't.
good point. Okay, so just on this point, real quick, I think this is really interesting. We mentioned that in Surah 49, this is when two groups of believers are fighting. It's true. Those groups that are fighting don't see each other as believers. However, there is a third party of a believer that sees both sides as believers or close to believers and enough to intervene. So then, therefore, it doesn't matter what the fighting sides say. Obviously, there's two groups of submitters fighting, right? Two groups of believers fighting. They're not going to recognize each other. That's obvious. But it's up to the third party that considers them believers to reconcile them and establish the peace. That's and I agree with Peter that it's not limited to physical fighting. If I see two groups of submitters being hostile towards each other or aggressing, one side is aggressing the other, I need to reconcile them. And it even says if one side is aggressing towards the other, you fight the aggressing group until they submit to God. And that's not just physical fighting, right? It's not limited to physical fighting.
I agree with that that the goal is peace. But the point is, my point is that we think we have soldiers out here in debates, and I'm saying that that is problematic. The whole spirit of it changes.
Yeah, I feel like the example of Moses when he went to the Pharaoh is very relevant because, like, even though the Pharaoh is like the worst as it comes, God told Moses to speak to him kindly that he may listen, right? Maybe he'll take heed. You don't know.
That's right. That's right. Speak the peace
Yeah,
is
so
at it, and disputes, fighting, disputes, arguments. The point is that we're transgressing against ourselves by taking this attitude of being a soldier fighting against somebody who is a potential believer. You can literally refute somebody by saying, "I don't agree," and that's refuting them. You don't need to bury them or trap them in a corner and make them feel like I hate this place because these people make me feel ridiculous in their argumentation. I see it all the time that we trap each other. We don't treat each other as potential believers kindly. You certainly do see when somebody comes here new to a site, we're very kind with them. but we kind of let that go after a while. Yeah, there's some really blasphemous things and ideas being presented, and we feel strongly. But I think it's upon us to check our emotions. And I'm
Yeah.
saying this to
So,
myself. I'm one of the worst ones.
inshallah, we are not emotional. Inshallah, we kill our ego. But in terms of using the term fighting and soldier, the point of a soldier is to fight. And we see in chapter 37, it regards the messengers as soldiers. So they're fighting for the cause of God. So spreading God's message in a general sense, defeating a falsehood and supporting the truth, that makes you a soldier. That makes you fighting in the cause of God. Now, I understand the way you're taking it. You're saying as if, okay, I see a Christian here, I'm fighting him and I'm making it personal and I'm attacking him personally. But really, I don't see it that way. I see that I'm fighting for God's truth. I see it, I fight that, I fight for, inshallah, the correct ideology. And so I don't see anything wrong with it. I see that in the Quran repeatedly for us to do that. It's not about personal battles. It's not about bitterness. It's not about disputes in that way. It's about if we believe in what we believe, then we should be able to defend it. And every interaction I have either strengthens my position and my belief or causes me to learn how it's wrong and I modify it. There's no other way, right? So I see it as a net positive in that way. And I don't have any problem with the characterization in terms of the vocabulary that we use in this regard. It doesn't mean that I have to call someone names or be rude or disrespectful in terms of, using profanity or like that. And so I can give you an example. For example, yesterday, there is a girl that believes in the false messenger, and another submitter, a brother, came and said, well, you're just a strayer, this and that, and going off. And I said, look, that's great, but let's actually address the point. It's not the most appropriate and beneficial way to just label them repeatedly without actually addressing the point. It's important to address the issue. And so to me, the vocabulary of fighting is okay to use.
I would just say that God does tell us debate in the best possible manner, and so I'm talking about that. What do we consider best possible manner? And what I would say is that more than anything, if we're going to repel somebody, and that's going to be against your soul, you're going to lose your credits. You're going to have to pay for that. It's our behavior is what's going to repel somebody. Nobody is repelled by simply the content of how somebody is being challenged, like with a concept. Oh no, I think A equals B. It's when you say no, that's ridiculous. A doesn't equal B, and this kind of thing. Suddenly, you're in a whole different, a whole different demeanor. And I'm saying that when people conflate this fighting in with their argumentation, because they feel like it's righteous, and I'm going to win. I'm going to beat this person in this debate. This kind of thing, wanting to bury your enemy. This kind of thing. I don't know. I'll stop there though. That's my last.
If I can change topics, I think reading the first book of Samuel, where it talks about these encounters, there's it's worth kind of the looking into. The first one is this request, even for them to have a king, right? It's like if you read first book of Samuel's chapter 8, starting from verse 10, and I'll paste it. It says, Samuel told the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, this is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his right. He'll take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses. They will run in front of his chariots. He will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of fifties, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants and best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When the day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. It's fascinating as I see this happen so much. If society runs into some problem, And their solution is, if we only had a monarch, a king, a dictator, someone to just take the reins and fix this problem, we'll be so much better off. And they get exactly what they asked for, and then they end up becoming subjugated to this person's whims, and then they basically complain about it. It's fascinating that, if you have the opportunity to be self-sovereign, that people will give that up in order to be a slave, because it's the easy solution. And so often than not, like, you see societies just like vote themselves into destruction, and at the end of the day, they have no one to blame but themselves.
Can I comment on another verse? I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about what verse was that? 251. It says towards the end of it, the middle and end, it says, if it were not for God's support of some people against others, there would be chaos on earth, right? So I actually see this, and I don't know, and someone can correct me or give another point of view, but I see this, for example, as the United States. Because let's say Hitler won World War II, or the Soviets won in the Cold War. There would be chaos on earth, and there would be nowhere for God's message to actually survive. I think we take this for granted, right? So it says, if not for God's support over some people against others. So the United States won. Now we are actually able to be here. But if Soviet Union took over the whole world, where would the Quran even be able to be, right? Or messenger of the covenant, or all these concepts that we're discussing in our freedom of religion and this and that. So the fact that there is such an opportunity for us, to me, it seems divinely dictated. But I'm curious about anyone else's thoughts.
I mean, you think about just the possibility. So right now, in the past was communist Russia. They're going to take over. Now it's communist China, and all these places. It's just fascinating that they despise God, despise Salat. It's funny. My parents went to go do a vacation, a tour of China, and they were obviously submitters, and there was another Muslim couple there. They were in Beijing. They found an alley to go and pray in, and then the freaking cops come and basically try to arrest them for praying. You think about what a heinous society this is. That anything having to do with God, with religion, they want to eradicate. They take the Uyghur people, they put them into camps, and they basically are transforming their salat to pay homage to the Chinese Communist Party. You see, just today I saw a video. They have a new outbreak for COVID, that they're doing a mass lockdown. That there's adults prostrating to the police so they won't get taken away or beaten. That this is what happens when you remove God from the equation. All that enters there is something else. And you can either submit to God, most gracious, most merciful, or you can submit to the tyranny of individuals. Those are your two choices. It's just so fascinating how quick people are willing to throw out their freedoms, their liberties, their freedom of religion, freedom of speech, for temporary relief. And they don't realize the long-term ramifications of such a decision.
MashaAllah. So should we move on to our next verses, or?
You want me to?
Yeah.
We can just put the last batch of verses, and then we can open it up for.
No.
anything else.
I gotta read this. This is too good, so good. If someone else wants to read it, by all means. But this chapter regarding David and Goliath in the Bible, every time I read this, it's like you just get goosebumps, in the sense of, you think the premise behind this. This is not a trivial thing. Have this boy, a shepherd. He has no fighting experience. He has no training in armory and these kind of tactics. Every single person from the command of Saul was terrified by Goliath. Everyone. Here's this child who comes and says, "Dude, I'll take him." And it's just like the confidence one has, and this is the difference between arrogance and confidence. This confidence did not come because David believed in his how awesome he is. He believed in God who sent him. That God basically is not going to allow a Philistine who's defiling the name of God to be victorious. It took a child to realize this, and all the adults were shaking in their boots and finding excuses. Um, do you guys want to do you guys want to hear the verses or
Yeah, go for it,
No,
please.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
so this is from Book of Samuel, chapter 17. So okay, let me see where's a good starting point. Okay. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of the shepherd, loaded up and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, ran to the battle lines, asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance. David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now the Israelites had been saying, "You see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughters in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel." David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" He repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what we will be done for the man who kills him." Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men. He burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? With whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how how conceited you are, and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. Now what have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" Then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man. He has been a warrior from his youth." David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off the sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair and struck it and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." He took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from his stern, put them in a pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with this sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine was his shield bare in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over, and that he saw was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome. And he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know it is by the sword or the spear that the Lord saves. The battle is the Lord's, and he will give it of all of you in our hands." The Philistine moved closer to attack him. David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag, taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand. He struck the Philistine and killed him. David ran, stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword, drew it from his sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. The men of Israel and Judah surged forward and shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Dead were strewn along the Sharim and Gath and Ekron. The Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines. They plundered their camp. David took the Philistines' head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistines' weapons in his own tent. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said, Abner, commander of the army, Abner, whose son is the young man? Abner replied, As surely as you live, the majesty I do not know. The king said, Find out whose son this young man is. As soon as David returned him killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul. With David still holding the Philistine's head, Whose son are you, a young man? Saul asked him. David said, I'm the son of the servant Jesse of Bethlehem. Every time I read that, I get goosebumps.
Well, thank you, dude, for reading that. MashaAllah.
Dude, like the confidence he had was awesome, especially when he said like, so that people may know that there is a God in Israel. And like the way he's talking about taking his carcass to the birds and everything. The confidence you have when you know God is with you. It's just crazy.
It's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. Arrogance is thinking you're doing it out of your own, abilities. Confidence is knowing that God is the one who's controlling your hand, who's controlling the outcomes. Once you realize that, look, none of this is up to me, none of this is up to any of my ability. For God's sakes, I could walk out there, stumble, fall on my spear, and kill myself. But if God allows it, if God is the one who's controlling our steps and we're doing the righteous deeds that please God, we have to trust that anything we do, anything we say, any step we make, that God is the one who's coordinating that. And even if it looks that it's for our detriment, God can make it for our victory. It's fascinating in the sense, like, you look at what the children of Israel and the believers of the past were asked to do. You know, in the past, this was a requirement. You had to go and pick up arms. You had to go and fight the other side, and you had to risk life and limb for to prove your faith. And today, it's so different. It's like if you want to prove you're a believer, the stakes are so much lower, but it seems so much harder. Okay, you have to, give to charity, stay away from sinful acts, speak kindly and humbly. Like these are the requirements. And what's fascinating is you can look at two people, in the past, you wouldn't know who's the believer, who's the disbeliever, right? It wouldn't be apparent because both they seem similar. Today, you can look at the lifestyles of two people and immediately distinguish, who's a believer and who's a disbeliever. If someone is spending their life filling their brain with gossip and nonsense and backbiting and sinful acts and idol worship, it becomes so blatantly obvious. When you stumble to someone who's like devout, committed to God, who praises God continuously, it's like their actions just speak for themselves. That's all that's asked of us. We don't have to go and fight and risk our life and limb. We just have to be steadfast, maintain the ritual practices, committed to God alone.
All right. Any questions regarding Quranic topics? Anyone wants to raise? We can discuss. And if we
Assalamu
make that,
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, how are
Hi.
you?
I'm well, thank you. I just wanted to say very quickly, thank you. It's really lovely to join you, and inshallah, I can do that again next week. I agree with a lot of what Jeff T mentioned in terms of how people treat each other. I find it quite embarrassing sometimes the way people behave on the submission, the Facebook page, and just when people belittle other people for having a different idea or a different understanding, and they resort to name calling. And I totally agree with Jeff, and I understand where he's coming from. That is something that shouldn't be happening. I feel that we're all truth seekers, and the truth, when you speak the truth, you can't and even if you have a misunderstanding about something, you can clear that by speaking the truth. There's no need to belittle or name call other people. And sadly, unfortunately, it is happening within the submitter community. So I do concur with Jeff T.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. Welcome to the server. I don't know if I've seen you around or not, but we're happy to
No,
have
it's my
you.
first time. Yeah, it's my first time. And
Yeah,
thank you.
welcome to server. Yeah, welcome. It's good to have you. I agree with this whole name calling issue. That it's important to focus on the topics and not particularly like resort to just immediate labeling and belittling.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's really important. And I agree with you that this has been a problem plaguing many submitter communities around the world. So, but was there a question? I guess do I pronounce it correctly? Nafis? Nafis?
Nafis. It's Nafis. No, I don't have a question today, but inshallah, I hope to join you again, and perhaps in the future I may have a question.
So if you look at the Quran, this is a very important point. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. It says 1625 should be. So if you look at the Quran 1625. It says, "You shall invite to the path of your Lord with wisdom and kind enlightenment, and debate with them in the best possible manner. Your Lord knows best who has strayed from his path, and he knows best who are the guided ones." So we see sometimes conversations get heated, discussions get very heated, and especially like what I see outside the server is people get to name calling, like Jeff said, and then inside the server I haven't seen real name calling, but I've seen like very heated debates. So basically, the verse is saying that we should be inviting with wisdom and kind enlightenment and debate in the best possible manner. That's also interesting. Like I said, Jeff said that people outside like revert to name calling, but this is a command from God, and they're basically transgressing the command of God. And this is what this verse now says: is Surah 2, verse 59 says, "The wicked among them carried out commands other than the commands given to them." Well, this is what happened, right? And the verse continues, says, "Consequently, we sent down upon the transgressors condemnation from the sky due to their wickedness." So this has a certain result to it, a bad result. So it's pretty important to keep this command here. I actually agree that debating is actually striving the cause of God. I also thought that, but we should be mindful of how we debate. That's a very good point that Nafis made as well, mashallah. So, and the others as well, of course, mashallah.
If I could share one thing, the light close by shared this verse 64. It says, "A good example has been set for you by Abraham and those with him, and they said to their people, 'We disown you and the idols that you worship besides God.' It says, 'And we denounce you, and you will see nothing from us except animosity and hatred until you believe in God alone.'" Um, One of the, I think, mistakes that people make in this verse is they think this is justification for animosity and hatred. What's interesting is, and it gets kind of lost, if you continue reading 60 verse 5, it becomes more apparent that this animosity and hatred is not one-sided, that it's actually mutual. This is part of the understanding I have, that the Quranic system is tit for tat with room for forgiveness and misunderstandings. But there is a point that, in essence, where you see, if someone's being harsh and stern and aggressive, they have every right to basically retaliate in the same manner. And this is proven. It's interesting. They've done studies where this is the best way in order to get peace. If you let one side to overbear the other side, you're not going to have peace. That it has to be met with an equitable response. And so I just wanted to bring that point out, that this, response from Abraham is not one-sided. It's not like those people are being kind and compassionate, and here's Abraham being, showing animosity and hatred. This is a mutual act between the two parties.
That's a really good point. And then I put a verse, the 16125. I guess it was already put by Erdem. But basically, I wanted to emphasize the debate with them in the best possible manner part. So it's my understanding this is in regard to Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and just people in general. I think, if I'm wrong, if anyone can correct me, I appreciate it. But I do think we should debate in best possible manner. And to me, best possible manner includes addressing the points that the other side is actually making. So what I've seen many times in these bitter debates is that the points are not addressed. And I've noticed with several topics, there's just many points that don't get addressed by the other side. And then they resort to just labeling, name calling, belittling, dismissing, and these kinds of tactics. I think that's wrong. But I do also agree with the point that was raised that, look, we can react in appropriate manner. For example, if someone gets aggressive towards us, you know, it's like if someone raises their voice, maybe you're authorized to raise your voice a little bit, or if they act in a more aggressive way, you are able to retaliate. Obviously, God says, pardoning and forgiveness and patience is also good. However, it's not always the case. When you're attacked, you basically have to just, basically just take it. So, the believers are strong, inshallah. But I think that's really important. And I just don't see this issue of inshallah, there's not this animosity, and we're just focused on the issues. And I really say this for everyone, because like I said, for example, there's people that believe in false messengers, and I think they should just be refuted. We should be patient, and we should just go through the topics and actually address the points that are being raised, rather than just focusing on just the labeling aspect of this approach.
I would like
Do you think? Forgive me. Sorry. Do you think Abraham was talking about the animosity towards the system of the people, of the other people that were against him, because they were also against Abraham's belief in the one God, and they wanted to push their idol worship? So, do you think that animosity is talking about the system of the people?
I don't think it's just the system for sure, but we have the example of Noah, where he's literally in his prayer, he wishes destruction for the disbelievers, not just their system. So I have to reconcile them. I see these kind of go hand in hand, right? This is in Surah Noah. What is it? Is it the last verse of Surah Noah?
They will give birth to nothing but wicked disbelievers. But there is a contingency
No.
there.
I'm talking about verse 28. It says,
21,
but do
28?
not give, 71:28. It says, but do not give the disbelievers anything but annihilation.
I'm curious if that's before or after it was inspired to know that no more people were going to believe. Does it say in the verse?
And then, let me just read it. So, from verse 26, it says, Noah also said, my Lord, do not leave a single disbeliever on earth. And then verse 27, for if you let them, they will only mislead your servants and give birth to nothing but wicked disbelievers. My Lord, forgive me and my parents and anyone who enters my home as a believer, and all the believing men and women, but do not give the disbelievers anything but annihilation. I just want to address, though, Nafis's point. I agree with her that many times, most times, always, there is also a systemic problem that needs to be addressed. I think they go hand in hand. There's bad people doing bad things, and then there's the creation of a bad system, and then sometimes there is good people that get swept up in the crowd but are perpetuating a bad system. And I think that's really important to distinguish and recognize the subtlety there.
If you go to a thing, I go always to 1331. Is it not time to realize that you cannot guide, that I am the only guide? Let me read that. 1331. That's my point. That's my 1331. Even is that it? Is that the verse I was thinking about?
I think you're thinking 2856. 1331,
No,
it's the same topic, but the one that says you cannot guide the ones you love.
no. I'm still looking for the one that says, "Is it not time for the believers to realize that they cannot guide people? I'm the only guide." That's when people trying to convince, or is it?
It is
31:13?
1331. Yeah, that one
Maybe
is 1331.
it is 31. 31:13 maybe instead of 13:31.
No, it's 1331.
Is
All
it?
right.
I put it 1331. 13:31. Even if a Quran caused mountains to move, or the earth to tear asunder, or the dead to speak, they will not believe. God controls all things. It is not time for the believe. Is it not time for the believers to give up and realize that if God willed, He could have guided all the people? The disbelievers will continue to suffer disasters as a consequence of their own works, or have disasters strike close to them. Until God's promise is fulfilled, God will never change the predetermined destiny.
If I can make a comment regarding the statement that Noah's prayer was inaccurate, that somehow he's committing a sin by making this prayer. My thought is God chose to put these words from Noah inside the Quran for us to learn from. The fact that God didn't say, for instance, that hey, this prayer is wrong, Noah shouldn't have said this. I don't believe it. If you look at Surah 11, verse 36, and that's what I was asking is if this prayer came before or after this inspiration. It says Noah was inspired. No more of your people are going to believe beyond those who already believe. Not be saddened by their actions. And God already told him that anyone who doesn't join, any of his people don't join him on his raft, are doomed. So, in essence, if Noah's making this prayer and God is putting it in the Quran and is not saying that this is wrong, Noah shouldn't have said this, then I accept that there's legitimacy to it. Now, I might not fully understand it, I might not fully grasp what's being stated, but to say that he's wrong in making these statements, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion. One thing though is the fact that God tells us that His patience far exceeds our patience. If it's up to us, we're very quick, just like the angels were, to dismiss people. This is a shortcoming we all have, but God is most gracious, most merciful. There's this interesting passage in 658. It says, say, if I controlled the retribution you challenge me to bring, the whole matter would have been terminated long ago. God knows best who the wicked are. I mean that the patience from the most righteous individuals, even the angels, is nothing in comparison to the patience that God has. And a perfect example of this that was brought up earlier was that of Pharaoh. God told Moses, despite all his transgressions, speak to him nicely. That at that moment he had the possibility, the potential to change his belief. He chose not to. And at a certain point, he's done, where it says, harden their heart, give them nothing but annihilation. That he's beyond the point of redemption. And God even tells us in the Quran, there is a certain point where we have to make that determination on someone. It says, "Oh, you believe, do not befriend people whom God is angry." These are people who deserve God's wrath. When we say the Fatiha, those who deserve God's wrath, this is the individuals we're talking about who are hopelessly stuck in disbelief. They're just as hopeless as those the disbelievers who are already in the graves. To say that this doesn't constitute any human being on this planet is wrong. There are people who meet this criteria. The aspect is we have to be very cautious not to willy-nilly apply this to the masses that it doesn't apply to. But there are certain individuals who have exceeded the limits of transgression, that there's no hope for them. Take Satan. There's no way this guy's going to repent and reform. His destiny is already written. And there's to him, there's people on this planet who are probably exponentially even worse than Satan because they make claims that Satan would never make. And for those people who are hopelessly stuck in disbelief, we can't sugarcoat it. We can't, in essence, deny that fact.
I just wanted to check in with Nafis and see if she got her answer, or because I wanted to say I just agree with what she's talking about is a dysfunctional, or not dysfunctional. I mean, it could be dysfunctional, but like a broken system and a system that needs to be addressed, and a structural problems with the way the facilitation.
Yeah. Salam, Navid. What I was talking about was basically people who opposed Abraham. They wanted to worship idols. They didn't want to worship the one God. So by system, I meant Abraham's system was worshipping one God, God alone, and the people opposing Abraham were against that system. They had their own system of worshipping idols. So the animosity, from my understanding of that, is shown towards that system of wanting to worship idols, because they again were showed animosity towards Abraham. So it was a mutual thing. I think that's what I was trying to get across, perhaps.
And myself, I never said, and I will never say, I never did say that. People misrepresenting that Noah was wrong. I said he was speaking emotional. That's what I said. Everybody heard me. That's emotional. When Jonas left, he was emotional. When God said go to the east and he went to the west, he's emotional. That's emotions. He got rejected by his people. He got emotional. He got frustrated. He went the other way. He's a messenger of God. That's emotional. If people belittling you, talking crazy about you, you're emotional. Or God destroy them all. Emotions. If not, they will misguide every single one of you. None of you will come here and say that people can misguide beside God. None. Dude, we're not gonna say it. Nobody's gonna say it. Noah said this. If you live on earth, they will misguide everybody. Who is he to say that? Who is guiding? God. I mean, we're discussing here, and then you're accusing me of having said that he's wrong. No, I said he was emotional. We all did that. We
Yeah.
point you be cursing some people because you're frustrated. May Allah destroy him. That's it. It's emotions. That's all I said. I never said he was wrong or right. I said he was emotional.
Can I just say one thing too? So it's interesting. We're quoting a lot from Surah 60, or Nafis, 3 verses after Abraham's statement. God says, the verse I put, verse 7, says, God may change the animosity between you and them into love. And so I think we need to be willing to embrace that, right? So the verse 5 says, "Let us, our Lord, let us not be oppressed by those who disbelieved, and forgive us. You're the Almighty, most wise." So we have to be willing to have people change and our feelings towards them change. But if we are set on our ways, then we will not accept any change, even when it's due. So I think we need to be very careful in that regard.
Also, I would like to add that it's been pointed out that all of our practices in submission are designed to facilitate self-control, all of them. And that's by Dr. Khalifa in submitters in different media formats. And so I think that kind of tells us that regulating ourselves, it's about and also I'd like to say that when dealing with people, you don't want to win. You don't want to win in a way where you want the other person is groveling, even in international relations. When a victory and the reparations are made too strong, it causes resentment in the people, and you don't want to push your supposed victory to a point where the other person is resenting it. It's better to stay back a bit. Like, for example, with Abraham, he just said in his debate with the king, can God can you rise the sun from the west? It didn't go further than that, trying to bury him in an argument. It's just you leave a point, you stop at some point, and you leave some dignity for people. This is the thing. We're trying to destroy each other's dignity and having them grovel and tell us, I don't know, to accept defeat and these kinds of things. And I think that we're not treating each other with dignity.
Just to add to that, I think it's really important. Like I said earlier, it's really important to recognize the arguments or the statements of the other side, because this is part of humanizing each other. Because you're right. As soon as we dehumanize each other to a point, and basically what happens is, if you dehumanize someone enough, then it's really easy to just dismiss them, label them, disregard them, and basically see no value in anything they have to say, which is obviously not true. Everyone has something, most people at least have something of value. to say in some setting. So I think it's really important to just add on to what you're saying, to not participate in a dehumanization process when it's not due, right? It's just not appropriate. But I've seen this many times in the submitter communities where they'll dehumanize someone so much to add to the facilitation of basically dismissing that individual, because it makes it a lot easier when you dehumanize someone, right?
Yeah, and also the verse which, be harsh and stern with the hypocrites and disbelievers. That's, I think that's taken out of context, because if you tell, for example, what the Quran says, it says that, if you continue doing idol worship, you're going to hell. I think that's the harsh and stern part. It's not about, you idiot, you're going to hell. I don't think it's, I don't think it's like that. I think it's basically stating the fact that you're still being, we need to look at the Quran as a whole, right? We can't just abrogate another verse which says debate with them in the best possible manner using another verse. We don't let the verses fight with each other. That's not how it works. You take them both. So you take debate with them in the best possible manner, and be harsh and stern with them. Actually, debate with them in the best possible manner is a very general verse. Harsh and stern is with the hypocrites and disbelievers, because they need to hear that if you commit idol worship, if I commit idol worship, I would want to hear it as well. I would actually want to be corrected on that. It's a pretty important topic. So you need to be harsh and stern, but it's not about name calling, It's just telling them, stating fact that if you do this, you can go to hell. I think that's how I interpret it.
Right. I think that's excellent. I think the truth has a cutting edge. That's the harshness. Simply the truth. Saying it in a way that is dismissive is not okay, because that's against you. The truth is enough in itself, I would say.
Can I just make a point on this? So, for example, Erdem and I, we disagreed, or I don't know if we could call it disagreed, but we had different point of views on a particular topic that is pretty contentious. But mashallah, and inshallah, in the future, we will be able to just address the issues without, jumping to like broad categorizations, and Erdem can testify to this. We look at the verses, we present our evidence, and we kind of examine the ideas. We all know the implications of one ideology over another, right? If I say something is haram and you say it's halal, then one of us, in a way, is kind of committing idol worship, right? Because then we're attributing lies to God, and we're getting a source other than God telling. For example, if I say it's haram, that I'm basically, it's a form of idol worship, because there's an entity other than God telling me that something is haram. So we know the implications of a lot of these debates, but at the same time, we need to be able to peacefully address them, knowing full well that these can have very severe and eternal consequences. But for me, that makes it even more important to be very careful in our analyses and addressing of the other side. We commit acts of idol worship all the time. We should just be willing to discuss it. That's it. And it's not about intent. If I prohibit something that's not prohibited, right? Obviously, I don't intend to be evil, right? My intention is not to be wrong. Maybe I'm just not understanding it properly, but that doesn't mean it's not idol worship. It is, right? But inshallah, I will correct myself and understand the correct meaning and fix my understanding and behavior. Or not behavior, I mean, maybe behavior, but you know what I'm trying to say. My belief. So I don't understand what the issue is here with recognizing this. Ultimately, it is. And knowing this, we should still be able to have a civil discussion about the topics, because the implications are vast. But if I just dismiss the other side and I have zero recognition of an opposing view, that's extremely problematic. We learn from the messenger of covenant, we should put ourselves on trial. We should put ourselves on trial, put our beliefs under a microscope, and go through them one by one. Systematically examine each one and say, okay, let's say we take a defeated side, say, okay, maybe you commit idol worship. Okay, let's examine it. And then we say, okay, based on this deep, thorough analysis where I'm fully recognizing what the other person is saying, I don't see the idol worship. That's fair. That's what we should be doing. What's wrong with that?
When we look at these kind of topics, honestly and rationally. When you warn somebody of a behavior, you're warning them of dire consequences. You're doing it out of love, actually. Actually, I don't want any of you guys to suffer. I don't want you to go to hell. And therefore, the warning, and even saying the dire consequence is out of love. You know, if it's coming from the right perspective, unless we're just trying to win an argument, then it's not.
So, but that's sorry, but that's a good question. Like, for example, Naveed, why would you say that someone who has an opposing view on a certain topic is not an idol worshiper? Um, I guess you assume in the situation that there's no
Yeah,
full proof. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, like Rashad Khalifa explains that we treat everyone as a potential believer until time of death. That's one aspect. Another aspect is that I don't see this as a foundational portion of their existence. Like if I see Jeff worshiping God, I need to recognize it. And 652 says, "Don't dismiss those who worship their Lord." So I have to be very hesitant about that. At the same time, I can say, okay, well, a particular belief or act does constitute idol worship. But is it possible to commit idol worship but not be an idol worshiper? I believe that it is possible, right? Joseph was never an idol worshiper, but he committed an act of idol worship. So these are subtleties that we have to recognize. And so I'm very hesitant to just use one brush label and throw everyone into the same camp as someone's literally prostrating to Jesus or whoever.
This is actually super important to understanding universal unity. Huh, interesting.
That's a good point, Joseph.
Yeah, because it is about universal unity. At the end of the day, this is about God. And then if we want to be sectarian about it and create sects and cults and these disputing, competing organizations, that's a problem, and that's what I have an issue with, and that's why. If everyone falls under this umbrella, look, we have this. I don't want to make it about this server, but in like, as far as I can tell, for example, on Discord, this is the only public submission server on the entirety of Discord. And what is that? 500 million people are on this, website or app or whatever you want to call it, right? So it's like we should have the ability to peacefully coexist here, express our ideas, have competing ideas and points of view. That's good. And so this is really important. I don't want to have to say that, okay, someone is not allowed. Someone cannot participate. Share their point of view. Share their point of view. And this is what I was getting at. I understand now. Nafis was talking about a different system when she was talking about the systems. But my issue with system I wanted to address was this cult and sectarianism ideology of many submitter groups I've seen around the world for the last 32 years. All the submitter groups have ended up in cultish ideologies. And I don't think that's appropriate. And I see that as a systemic problem within the submitter culture. So this is the point of this server, was to address these issues, get to the root of it, and allow a space for people to express themselves peacefully without being dehumanized. I think that's really important, and many people have witnessed it and experienced it, and many are coming to this realization that there is nothing to show for 32 years after the messenger of covenant has left this earth. So this is the hope for the change. But in particular, yeah, I just don't want to, have to quickly dismiss people. And so we want to give everyone a chance. We want to discuss the issues, focus on the issues, strengthen our knowledge, strengthen our understanding, and inshallah make progress in this regard. The point is to worship God alone, and then what that facilitates needs to be addressed and discussed.